Hello, everyone. Glad y'all can join us tonight. We got be talking about some missing children and possibly murdered children tonight. But we also must remember about today's anniversary of the kidnapping of Lyric and Elizabeth from Evansdale. And so let's all remember them. And if anyone has any information, most certainly call in the tip line. And I believe they're having a motorcycle ride and memorial this weekend. So if anyone has anything they can do to help along with the memorial on that, most certainly reach out to them and help them in any way possible. But tonight we're going to be talking about some the Des Moines issues of the missing two of the boys. Of the three were newspaper boys. The third one was just a neighbor who lived within the same proximity as the other two. But anyway, let's get started here and we'll go into the slideshow. Just as always, introduce myself. I'm a retired law enforcement, 20 years of service, worked in everything from the jail to road patrol to investigations, worked SWAT, counter sniper, state certified crime scene tech, investigator, and worked everything from burglaries to homicides. And then I retired and became interested in this as working with some other creators, doing some consulting, and this is what brought us till today. But today we're going to be looking at Des Moines, Iowa in the 1980s. There was a predators in those areas that was active, not just in these areas, but all across the country. And they were targeting a lot of the newspaper boys and things for the fact that if you think about how predators operate and how they target certain individuals, regardless if it's adults or children. But with children, if you're looking for a certain type or certain age group, these predators know how to find them. And most certainly during the 80s, which was pre-internet like we have it now, they knew exactly what to do. And that was going to be targeting a certain age group of boys that were doing a certain job. And that job was newspapers. If you go on online now and research throughout the states, you'll find that there's a large percentage of the missing abducted children that were taken off their newspaper routes. I never really realized it until I started doing some research into the Gosch, the John Gosch situation that is, known everywhere now. But once I started doing the research on it, you can see clearly how back then, prior to what we call catfishing now, but how they would target and attempt to find children that were isolated and everything. But some of the stuff that I created for this show is to not only bring focus to these victims, but also to assist you, our web sleuth communities, that when you're looking at these cases, and as we progress and we have some other things that we're going to be doing in the future on cases with our community, that this is a process I want y'all to understand, so that when you're looking at cases, that you will be able to look at it with hopefully a new understanding and certain things to look for. And whereas you can build some patterns, create some great data, and be able to get some information collected, and we'll be able to discuss it, and we'll have a true impact on some of these predators and in future cases, because there's no difference from a cold case to an active case. If there's an active case going out there, the same processes that we look at and trying to solve and trying to help and assist in the older cases will work with a new case just as well. But anytime you have a predator, in this case, we're looking at the child predators, that, all of them, why are they targeting these young boys? It's most certainly that sexual motivation. That's part of their fantasy. And who were they targeting, especially on the cases that we're looking at tonight, was those young teens, male teens. And these predators would look at it and they would target them, that you're looking at a paper boy that's isolated early in the morning on his paper route. Most people aren't up. It's almost work schedule, or if they are up, they're either in a house that is lit, or they're prepping for work, showers, or otherwise. And so it's not that the streets are real busy. The only persons out there really are just the young paper boys running their routes, and they're going through areas of that. If there is a predator that's looking up for an ambush point that has familiarized itself with that area, he'll be able to look at a house and see if there's anyone up and moving about. The houses that are lit up at this time of, between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning, lights on means there's somebody inside. But even when they're inside with that lit up, they can't see outside those windows into the darkness. And so it's very easily for how these predators would be able to identify an area that these boys were working, and most certainly target them at certain points on their routes, and easily identify ambush points, which, as with the John Gosch situation, there was a extremely high risk situation that their suspect put himself in that is credited that he's a person of interest. The vehicle was a vehicle that was spotted, actually stopped at the paper boys assembly locations, spoke to them, and from there went on to be able to be one of the last persons to speak to John Gosch prior to his disappearance. And the reason I go over the information about how to gather information on an individual case is that when we take that individual information of how to look at a crime, and then we bring in the database that we're working on with Cyclops with our volunteers, and most certainly hang around to the end of the video. I've got an update on how Cyclops is going, the volunteers that are working, and we most certainly want to thank all of them for that. But when we work hand in hand and have a good database, and as we develop this database and we look at it in a structured investigative pattern and develop certain leads and certain information, we'll all be on the same page, and we'll start understanding. And more eyes that look at this, the better chances that we can have an impact on these families and on these victims and on future cases also, which is probably, we try to help these cold cases, but as soon as something happens, and there's many cases that happen every day, every week, and we're going to start doing some of those hot cases, especially in the coming days, as this channel moves out and starts broadcasting and creating new content and trying to have even a greater impact than where we're at now. We're still developing and trying to get everything up and going so that we can have a positive impact. All right, so we're going to look at Iowa unsolved. There's a cluster that we looked at around Des Moines, and the 3 counties that were involved, of course, is the Polk, Story, and Jasper County. And from these 3 counties, you can most certainly see that we're looking at over 21 incidents from this one cluster, and which is a high mark for teenagers. Now, one of these 21s was an adult that was murdered at the same time as a 17-year-old girl. He was, I think, 21 at the time he was beaten to death. And so I included him into it because it's a double homicide, but which is an extremely high number for the clusters that when you look at the other states surrounding that, or the other counties surrounding this area, that it's just astronomical at the differences. But as you can see here in 1970s, that the population was right at 400,000, and it grew just over 200,000 from the 70s to the 80s. And the reason I went from the 70s is that we're having to look at a population prior to and grows into and comes on into present day, and see what these numbers are, for the fact that our stats come from 1968 through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and into 2022. But when you look at these numbers, like I said, they're absolutely staggering. And we've got other cases that we're looking at in other areas that we have other clusters. But from this cluster, I picked, and I have been asked by a lot of people that sent me emails and in comments to look at the John Gosch incident. Well, you cannot look at the John Gosch incident without looking at Eugene Martin and Mark Allen. There's other children that were missing from the 1990s, as you can see from this chart, all the way to 2013. But some of these older, newer cases are from 1990, 2001, 2013. A couple of those, there were some exigent circumstances, whereas they might be some information that they may be runaways or they had communications with them that was later, and they had indicated that they may be going somewhere else. That wasn't the case with John Gosch, Eugene Martin, and Mark Allen. John Gosch was a newspaper boy. Eugene Martin was a newspaper boy. Mark Allen wasn't. But the proximity of these three children is absolutely staggering in that small localized area in Des Moines. But and when you look at John Gosch, I mean, there is a lot of, his investigations and what happened with him over the years and the sightings. Even the report says his mother says that he returned home later in life and had a meeting with her, and that he was escorted by a suspicious person, to some of the other information that came about while these cases were evolving and law enforcement was looking into them and they was building them. The John Gosch data is just absolutely unreal, with how many theories and new information that came out, and individuals that were predators that were arrested in those communities. That you even had people confessing to being part of the abduction and implicating other individuals. And so most certainly John Gosch is, and as you'll see when we talk about some of the information and the tip line, there's a certain difference of who is notified and what happened with him. But there's a lot of stuff that, that most certainly there's no way you can distinguish these three individuals, Gosch, Martin, and Allen, apart, and that they were targeted. Were they targeted by the same group? Absolutely. Two of them, as you'll see here in a moment when we start looking at some of the common factors between two of the abductions, that it's most certainly indicative that they were both targeted by, if not the same individual, same group of individuals, because it was a very odd situation of how John Gosch came up missing in those early morning hours, and who talked to him, and the fear that he showed. But here is a map of Des Moines that you can see where John Gosch was taken off of Marcourt Drive at somewhere between 6 and 7 a.m. in the morning on September the 5th. And as you can see, he's up there near in his neighborhood, which is very close to two high trafficked areas and easy access to some main roads, and but in a neighborhood that is, just a residential neighborhood where he's trying, he's making some money and never realizing the danger that he was in. Although I do believe that as we go on in and talk about this in a few minutes, I believe that he had some inclination that there was something that has struck him that has scared him. And then when we look at the Eugene Martin, which is about, I guess it's a little less than 8 miles between from where John Gosch was kidnapped to where Eugene Martin exact same thing between 5 and 5:45, still in that early morning time frame, that he was last seen on his paper route, and it was discovered that he was missing. And but then when you look at and these happened on a 2-year period. There was a brief period, cooling off period between these two abductions, and then 2 years later, we have the where Mark Warren Allen in the afternoon hours, and just within a half a mile to a mile from where Eugene Martin come up missing, as you can see with the arrows, that he was abducted just a few blocks away. And very disturbing that when you have this cluster of 3 young men that are almost exact same age being targeted. And there's some great information that can be looked at, especially from these abduction of 1984 and 1986. I mean, you know, you're talking about proximity of just what geographical profiling can be done, what individuals lived there. And we'll discuss some more about what we should be looking for in that area. And hopefully some of you may know some people in the Des Moines area that may be able to make contact, because I'm going to be contacting and see if I can't find some people that were from that neighborhood during that time period, because, you know, there's some information that most certainly was in the rumor mills during that time period that we don't have access to in the newspapers. And so we'll have to go out and see if we can't find some individuals from that area. This here is the investigator that handled the case. Investigator Raleigh, he was stellar. I mean, this man, when you look at his record, 200 homicides and 50 bank robberies, is absolutely unbelievable the number of major cases this man worked. I'll put no fault on this thing not being solved on him, because when you look at his success rate, 80% of them solved. So if you're given 250 major cases and you solve 200 of them, you're well above the average on solving crimes. And this man here, in some of the interviews, he made statements that they did everything they could, and that the only way that they think they could solve this case is that there would have to be a confession and bodies shown for the case to be solved. And that may be true, but he was also extremely bright, and he had some, you know, he asked a very valuable and intuitive question. Why the 2-year gaps between the crimes, and where did they go? And the only thing I'll add to that is not only where did they go, but where did they come from, and what was the start? And we'll be looking at another part of that here in just a minute. But this man here, he did everything, and he said, and he more focused on the Martin case. He said the Martin case was the case that would haunt him. It wasn't the case of Gosch that would haunt him. And I don't know how involved he was with Gosch, but with Martin, he was, you know, evidently, I don't know what the original case agent that was assigned to the Gosch, but he said Martin was the one that he would take to his grave as the one that he most regretted that he couldn't solve. And this was during the era of when new data, new processes was coming on in the 80s with computer systems and things. And he said as new technologies came about, they tried everything and did everything they could. And like I said, this man here was extremely good at his job. And if it could have been solved from the information that he had, I absolutely believe that he will have solved it. And I don't know how much involvement he had with Allen, but most certainly with the Martin case, he said that was the one that he would take to his grave as bothering him the most. They had and focusing on the Gosch incident, because that's the one that we have most of the information on as far as a sketch of a suspect, a description of a vehicle, that the newspaper boys that were gathered and starting their newspaper route that early morning, that this person pulled up in with a description of, they talked to him, saw him, able to do a sketch of him, and had a description of the vehicle. And during that conversations on some of the related information, Johnny Gosch said that he was frightened and he was going to go home. The other boys there at that time that partook that from the articles I read didn't sense the dangers. Why did Johnny Gosch sense that danger? Was he being targeted and he had seen this vehicle prior to? Had this man tried to talk to him prior? But there was something that made him say that he wasn't comfortable. The other the witnesses that talked to the police, there's no indication in the articles I read that they sensed that, but John Gosch did for some reason. I don't know if it was because the guy was staring at him and he had that stare that frightened him, or if there was a prior encounter or something and he realized something wasn't right. And most certainly there, even in the articles, that the boys that were talking to this guy they identified as Emilio said that prior to the guy leaving and after John Gosch had already walked away, that Emilio here, prior to leaving with his vehicle, turned the interior light on and off 3 times as if to signal someone else that whatever planning, staging, or whatever they had set up for an ambush or abduction, that afterwards these individuals looked back on and thought that this most certainly could have been part of the plan for the abduction, which, if you look at it from that standpoint, extremely well organized if they're targeting these children. And but they described a vehicle, 80-something model Ford, 2-door, 2-tone. And the second witness also said it was silver in color, that saw it in another area on down the street, speeding away from the area where John Gosch was taken. And but during that first conversation with those witnesses, this person driving this vehicle, he most certainly he asked about where's 86th Street, but from the where he was missing from to where 86th Street was, it was a main thoroughfare that was just a couple 3 blocks south of where the abduction happened at. And so there's certain information we have to look at, and I'm sure that during that time period that they pulled all the record files for this type of vehicles and similar type of vehicles, the Fords, to try to identify all the owners and of that type of vehicle. And we'll, as we progress with this, and hopefully we'll be able to get some information at some point as we inquire about some of the older records as we continue to look at this case, and as I build and ask some of the community that may be in that area to go and see if we can't get some information on certain vehicles during that time period, vehicle records and stuff, and see what type of Freedom Information Act we may be able to get on some information to work a cold case that has some information that we can get from those older records. But when we're looking at these suspects, and like Investigator Raleigh said, that where were they at during that 2 years period in between the crimes, and where did they go? Because he realized that if these 3 cases are connected, which law enforcement thought these 3 cases were connected, where did they go? And he's exactly right. But I will also go back, where did they come from? Where did this originate, and what other cases are out there? And as we go through the suspect and investigative questionnaire here, that I want all y'all, if you look at this case and you look at surrounding areas and communities, states, and across the country, that if there is a pedophile ring out there and they're working and they have certain criteria from that time period, we have to look at, and we may find older cases. And that was one of the things that, as I was doing some research on this, you can find a lot of cold cases, not only on the missing paper boys, but I also looked at the missing murdered Boy Scouts because they run hand in hand with each other. Same age group, certain ages of Boy Scouts, and most certainly there's a lot of those that were out there murdered and missing during this time period. And sometimes individuals were arrested and prosecuted for committing a crime, and they may be a cluster of crimes there that when they looked at those crimes and they arrest one person, the community may say, okay, we got the guy that did all of them. That may not be the case. We have to go in and look at all these cases from the Boy Scouts to the also the newspaper route boys that are missing and murdered across the country, and see that if there's some cases that stand out, and if there's some individuals that were caught later on, like the last case here with Allen in '86, that you may have someone in '92 or something that finally got arrested, or in the '90s that was arrested for one of these cases that is actually our suspect for the John Gosch, the Martin, Allen, and numerous other cases. And but that's what we need to do as a community. If we're going to work some of these cold cases, we have to understand that where do they originate? What is their MO with the Gosch and Martin incidents? It's that early morning isolated paper route boy that's out there by himself doing his job, easily targeted, easily ambushed. They abducted them and they talked to them. In both the Josh and the Martin case, because even in the Martin case, there was witnesses that saw Eugene Martin talking to an older man around 40, 41 years of age, and they thought it was a father-son conversation. So these people, just like with John Gosch, they pull up, they talk, they identify their target, and then there's an abduction. And so we have to look at those similarities and say, are these cases, most certainly made the law enforcement in that time period think that they were similar, which to me, they're almost identical. That if you have an older gentleman walk up, talk, and then there's an abduction, same time period, same type of victim, working a paper route, there's no ifs, ands, or buts that they most certainly appear to me to be linked. With what happened with Allen in the afternoon, telling his mama, save some pizza for me, because when I get back, I'm going to go talk to some friends, meet with them, and I'll be back and I'll be hungry. And that's the last time she ever spoke to him. But that's in the afternoon hours, just a few blocks 2 years later from Martin. And so we had to look at some of the geographical profiling, and that's how come we really need, and I'm trying to find if I can locate someone that was from that community during that time period. And if any of you out there know someone from that community during that time period, most certainly reach out to me, let me know who they are, and we'll try to make contact. I'm going to attempt to make contact with some of the family and look at some of this and see if they can tell me, who other had children of that same age, because there's a lot of information to be gathered about the talks within that age group during that time period. But we know what the motive, the MO of the predators were for those two cases. We don't know what the MO was for Allen and his abduction. But and we most certainly can speculate of what the motive was, that being sexually motivated for a child predator that would target a 13-year-old boy. Is the crime organized? From the two abductions that we know of, the adults talking, and that there's no witnesses, there's no crime scenes, there's nothing indicating anything other than we have missing children, that it was planned out and orchestrated for that exact order, so that there wouldn't be anything indicating who is responsible for it, other than these people were seen by other witnesses. and they weren't wearing masks, weren't wearing anything. So, and there's indicators, are they local or not? Not wearing masks and all of this most certainly would make you think that they're not scared of being identified, which kind of makes you think that they weren't local. But what makes me believe that there is a local connection is the proximity of the last two cases, Martin and Allen, two, just a few blocks of each other, and one morning, one evening. Not saying that there couldn't have been another sexual predator that took Allen, but if he's in with this, it might show that this is a place that might be a safe ground for operations of the situation to where they could take someone. Some criminals operate in certain areas that they have to have a safe ground that they'll go to. Bank robbers are probably the biggest part of this group that meets this description, that you just don't leave your house to go rob a bank, and you don't come back to your house after you do the robbery. You have an area where you can dress out, transfer whatever equipment, and prepare for the robbery, go to the robbery, and you'll come back to that same safe ground before you go home, change vehicles wherever that parking area is or whatever. And so everything's staged and orchestrated when you organize. It's going to be the same with abductions, that if you're going to abduct a child, you're going to have to be able to get somewhere safe, hide that vehicle. If you're driving something that's recognizable within a short period of time, and where would that location be? And when you do the geographical profiling, it most certainly appears to be that's going to be somewhere around that Martin Allen area, for the fact that if Allen and Martin are indeed connected, and one of them come up missing in the afternoon that was walking, that he was lured in somewhere to a vehicle or into a residence or into a business and was abducted from that location. And we have to look at what other cases, not only in Des Moines that this happened, but in surrounding areas, surrounding states, and when did they start? These aren't the only three cases that these perpetrators committed. They did a lot more. We just need to see if we can't find them, because Raleigh's right. We're not going to solve anything from these three cases. They've been looked at by not only Raleigh, who I think was a great investigator, but also other investigators that worked this case that have firsthand information. If it could be solved, they will have solved it. And so now we have to go out and look at other cases that might have been solved and try to link them to this. And that's where we can make a difference and possibly solve this, or from a previous incident of when they first started. Because as these predators first start, that's when they make their mistakes. That's when they can be identified. But as they learn and become more efficient and more effective, it's harder to identify. And but then when they get caught, you can always backtrack and see what similarities they were. And then we have to decide that, is it sort of like the John Wayne Gacy? Where are the victims? Gacy would bury them under his house. None of these three children, Gosch, Martin, or Allen, have been found. And so where are these victims and other victims that these individuals would have, where would they have been taken? That if they are murdered, what do they do with them? Where are they? And, and like Raleigh says, why the 2-year cycle? Don't know. And that's a very interesting question. But we have to look at other cases that happened within these 2-year cycles that they may have just been in a different part of the country. And what ruse did they use? Did they just come up, make a conversation? Did they stalk them? Did they have ambush points? How did they get these children so effectively, whereas no one ever witnessed the actual abduction? No one heard screams. No one saw anything. And so there had to be some effective, especially with one of the children being frightful, being John Gosch, that, he articulated that to his friends that he was uncomfortable, he was fearful, and he's going home. and have they stopped? And if they stopped, why did they stop? Were they arrested? Have they died? Or are they continuing on? Or is this pedophile ring, if it is a pedophile ring that's orchestrated and they do have, a well organized, as some of the theories are out there, then it's most certainly a dangerous thing that we have to look at and see if we can't stop. But we have to identify that if he did stop or he hasn't stopped, where is he? And Raleigh most certainly, he took that to his grave, and that's the biggest question he had in his interviews is, where did they go? And I have another question, and most certainly if we get a chance to talk to the community there is, are there other victims that these people spoke to? And that was going to be the biggest thing. That back then, children may have been scared. That may not be the case now, that these 13-year-old, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds back then are now full-grown adults, full-grown men. And they may have not been asked, or they may not realize, but if any point that we can get contact with them or make them aware of the situation, that we may be able to key a tip or two that might change the course of this investigation. That they may have had an encounter that they feel uncomfortable with, that one of these individuals most certainly targeted them, and for whatever reason, either they escaped, or they were chased, or they may even been assaulted and were able to escape later. And most certainly that's going to be probably one of the biggest things, that if anyone knows people from that neighborhood at that time period, that's most certainly one of the things I'm going to be looking for, and see if we can't build some leads and tips out of that. And as you do anything, as these predators commit these crimes, the morning that they took John Gosch, the morning they took Martin, they don't know exactly if there's witnesses, if it's been called in. They don't, they most certainly did it with as well planned as they can, but they have to and they know as criminals that there's always the unknown. And so they know that they can't be out there in a certain area very long out in the open. And so when you do an abduction, it doesn't matter if it's in Delphi, it doesn't matter where you're at. You have to have some type of plan of where you're going to take someone, and where is the crime going to be committed, and how is the crime going to be committed. And so if there is geographical profiling, if they're local, they had to have a place where they could take that vehicle, hide that vehicle, and be able to control that victim during a very critical time, immediately after it, because they don't know what the response of the law enforcement is going to be. They don't know if there's going to be 100 of them that come in, or just one or two. And geographically, when we looked at some of these things and a couple of the locations I looked at, two of the abductions, like with Gosch and Martin, another thing I noted, and one of the things that put me on, was some of the church locations that were on the same streets, that may have given a parking area where these people could have parked in that church parking lot and be able to set up their ambushes and still have a secondary vehicle or a location, whereas they wouldn't have to park on a street, wouldn't have to park into a lit area, that they could have parked in some of these church locations, which is with Gosch and Martin. These streets are within, you can throw a rock to two large parking lots that at that time with the churches that would have existed, that if there were secondary vehicles involved, or secondary people assisting in separate vehicles, that could have participated in the abductions. But anyway, I just wanted to cover all those areas. And let's see, if you have any information on these crimes, and if you are by chance someone that knows something about the cases, or you knew these individuals, this is the contact information. Contact the local law enforcement there, Des Moines, and give them the information. There's each of the children has their own specialized assigned agents that's different. Whereas with Gosch, he has FBI also associated with his. The other two, not. Find that a little bit strange. Don't know the circumstances of why that is. But that is interesting that the FBI was more involved with the Gosch, and it may be just due to the amount of attention that was focused on John Gosch at the time. And but with that being said, I'm going to give you an update that I want to thank everyone that has worked on the Cyclops product or program. And as they get the information to us and we start generating our new maps and we get the information out there so that you as a community can look at it and put more eyes on some of these cases, I want to thank all my volunteers. I mean, it's going along great, going along smooth. We still got a lot of work ahead of us, but we're getting there. And I got a new project that we'll be able to use with Cyclops, that with our community, that I most certainly going to need a lot of help on a lot of things so that we can have an impact. And this weekend, I'm working on another video. I've got about 3 projects, new projects working on Delphi right now. Also, we're very busy. But I got a new video I'm going to try to get out this weekend on some of the Delphi stuff that need to touch on. Always going to keep Delphi as one of the major cases that we have to look at, just like with Lyric and Elizabeth and Evansdale, major case we're going to have to keep on looking at and making sure that it gets all the attention that it deserves. But anyway, that's pretty much it. You got anything?
I do.
All right.
All right. Molly, glad you're covering the Johnny Gosch case. Also, the other boys who have never gotten anywhere near as much publicity. We do find that odd.
Yeah.
That is, I don't understand that. CCK and other places too. Wait a minute. Okay, so instead of I didn't know, he says I did know about Girl Scout cookie and things like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you look at the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts, there's so many cases out there about how these predators focus and target certain individual. It's easier now that it may not be easier, but most certainly with the internet, it offers a new platform for these predators to act. Back then, they were targeting these children in known clubs and known areas and known jobs. And it's just, absolutely unbelievable that such animals exist in our society.
All right. Molly, again, Johnny Gosch also had a strange encounter the night before under the bleachers talking to an adult male in an LE uniform. That was witnessed by the father at the end of the conversation.
Oh, yeah. John Gosch, I mean, there's so much information out there about so many different things and such suspicious things that happened before and after the abduction. And even years after, when the meeting that his mother said that he came back. And of course, there's a lot of discrepancies and a lot of argument. Did that really happen or not? I don't know. But it is one strange case, and it is absolutely amazing.
Okay, and Molly added, she said that night was the first time Johnny asked if he could go on his route the next morning alone. His dad always went with him before.
Yeah.
That's awful.
It is.
Okay, now this one is a little bit, it's not really on this one. Hunting Evil. I'm wanting to get donations to come in for a dual camera drone to actually in Indiana. You want to just email Steve at truecrimeweb.com and see what you want to do with that.
Yeah.
About drones in Indiana.
Yeah, just email me with what information, and we'll see what if we can help you do whatever you need to do.
All right, CCK. I feel like I'm in class, and I like it. Too funny.
Well, and the point of this is exactly is that what our taxpayers paid me a lot of money, or not paid me a lot of money, but I earned and I worked for the government, and through the citizens that pay taxes, they paid a lot of money for my training and for my thought processes and how we look at cases and what information that we gather and how we gather it and what to look for. And most certainly, y'all deserve the same information. And if y'all can have an impact, because I can't look at everything, but we as a community, and as we grow and our footprint gets bigger, what abilities and what can we do working unified and be a focused group to try to have impact? Because you guys out there, y'all are just as intelligent as I, and some of you can go out there and spend some time looking at these cases, and together we can have a great impact. And that's what the mission of this channel, that me and Mrs. Steve, that's what we want to do, is that we want to try to unify, organize as many people together to come up and be able to have some type of impact on some of these predators and put them where they need to be.
All right. And just Pam, tragedy in Indiana, missing man and 3 children found. So you already knew about that? Found
Yes.
Dead in car in a pond?
Yes. Yeah. He took his children middle of the night to go fishing. There's a lot of issues. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of issues there.
We'll let Steve figure that one out. All right. Olivia, 6 males between 12 and 19, white, close city proximity. My thoughts too. All right. And Molly, John, email. John,
Yes.
Eugene, Mark also look very much alike. Very similar age appearing also. Similar to Evan Stell from the 70s to, yep, you're right.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. These predators, they target certain individuals, certain age groups. And whenever we identify this, then we can go out to other areas, other states, because these predators haven't changed. If they're moving from one location to another and they're targeting, they're going to target the exact same victim, regardless of what community they're in.
All right. And CCK, did the boys know each other?
Not that I know of. Now, that doesn't mean, now 2 of them, Eugene Martin was a couple years, each of these children would have been a couple years younger than the other. So even if they were in the same school, they would have been a couple of grades apart. And then when you look at, 4 years apart, even, from the first case to the last case, that there's a lot of kids I didn't know at that age, in the same school, that 4 years younger or 4 years older.
All right. And just Pam. Oh my goodness. Great work. And yes, sometimes rumors are true.
Yes. And that's why I want to try to speak with some of these people up there, get my plate a little bit more full, so that, and spread out so that we can get attention focused on as many people as we can and as many cases as we can. And
CCK, you said the same thing I did. Must haunt him if he's still alive. Talking about Investigator Riley.
No, I looked him up today. I don't know if it's him, but there was a obituary of someone with his name that has passed.
And support with Stefa. He's going over them now. I love Steve's knowledge and perspective. Thanks, Stefa. All right. And Stefa. Oh, at True Crime Analyst, thank you for coming over. I'm sorry, I thought that said True Crime Web, so thank you. All right. And Molly, or intuition, gut feeling from Johnny. I think I recall witnesses saying the car did circle around twice.
Yeah. And like I said, there's something, I don't know if it's prior encounter or something, but there's something that struck him more than the other children. I believe just from, if the kids are remembering and the facts accurately.
And Olivia, I think you might have hit it. Maybe Johnny had a sixth sense.
Could be.
That's what it sounds like. Richard Dowdy, you guys are really making a difference. Thanks, Richard.
I hope that we all together can make a difference.
Huge difference. All right, Molly. Where's 86th Street? Is a strange question. If you live in a gridded off city, I think Johnny was on 45th or something. Do drive up 40 blocks, count the street numbers, easy peasy.
Actually, I don't even think it was that far. I looked on the map, the numbering system. He was on Marcourt, but from where the paper or the abduction is reported to have happened, but most certainly from that point to there, it's just a few blocks away, 86th Street.
And thanks, Steph and the Bible group for trying to get us to 1,000. They're working on it. Bless their hearts. All right. And CCK, do some people think the time of year difference is a copycat?
It can be. I mean, well, not so much a copycat, but these predators, they all, these sexual predators are looking for these teens. Predators are predators. They know where the watering hole is. They know the victim type. They know what age groups does certain jobs. They know where they're going to be. And so it's so hard to distinguish between a copycat or just another crime committed by a different pedophile that's also targeting the same children. We don't know yet. And that's how come we have to look at other areas. But the two cases between Allen and Martin, we're only talking just a few blocks of difference. That is, to me, that is the largest, biggest key. And like Raleigh, ever how you pronounce his name, the investigator, he focused more upon the Martin case. And so he thought that was a case that he could have solved and would have solved. And so that gives me some hope that he believes it's a local pedophile. And but I'm just speculating on that because, I know what the cases that I failed to successfully prosecute, even knowing who the individual or who I believe was the individual and not being able to get that necessary evidence, they haunt you. And that with that second abduction, and if it is the Allen case hooked to the Martin case, the geographical profiling tells you that if those two are linked, that guy lives, because one was early morning, one's afternoon, that there is a predator, regardless if they're not linked or not. There's a predator most certainly within that area of one of the two cases. If they're linked, it's the same predator. If they're not linked, there's at least one predator there.
All right. And Molly, 2-year cycle could be the boys outgrew the age group of interest. The Stainer child aged to a young teen, and his captor got another boy the same age Stephen Tainer was when he was abducted. Maybe that?
And that can be. And but if it is, it's a 2-year cycle. We're having that this individual has to have a location, and that's part of the information that where would he be holding them and keeping them captive for 2 years, and which is extremely, although it's been noted throughout, that sometimes some of these individuals, I think there's 3 or 4 years ago where several women were being held in a house that were captive for years. And one of them escaped, ran to a neighbor, and then they was able to identify this serial offender and murderer and arrest him. And the neighbors never realized that. Is that the case with this? Absolutely could be. And most certainly that is a possibility. And if so, it's someone local. But we still have to dispose of the bodies. And we have to find those locations.
All right, Suzanne Thompson, the killer was probably first person in the coffee donut shop with a newspaper in hand.
Could be.
Could be. And true crime analyst Noreen has been treated so badly?
And she, she's the reason of a lot of information, and how come John has been focused on so much is for the fact that um, it was her message to the world, and she did everything she could to bring focus upon him as being missed and lost. And I've seen where the other children, they said that their parents maybe weren't as well versed in how to use the media or how to just pitch a fit of being able to get that information out there. Some people can really pitch a fit really good, and
You looked at me when you said that.
yeah,
What?
yeah, and get the information out there and bring focus on. And she was gifted at that. I mean, she, even the president of the United States at the time recognized her for that. And
There's my baby. I'd pitch fit.
oh, I know. And but yeah, she most certainly, she's a female version of what John Walsh was, and brought a great amount of attention to our missing children, rightly so.
All right. And Molly at True Crime Web, is Johnny's mother still alive? She was very involved in trying to find Johnny. Should probably talk to you.
I haven't looked to see if she is alive, but I most certainly will attempt to reach out to her. I just hadn't got to that point yet. Like I said, we got some pretty full plates, but we're getting spread thin, but we're going to try to do as much as we can with at what time we have.
All right. And Olivia, or the perp is a psychopath and has no fear.
Most definitely, a lot of these psychopaths and these predators, their fear factors, like I say, they have fear, but they look at it in a different manner than we do. Bundy did the same thing. He went to a populated beach. Didn't bother him to talk to his victims in front of people. And so most certainly these other psychopaths, these other predators, anyone that would do this to a child, that's not just some average citizen. It's a certain personality that does stuff like that.
And CCK, no mask is probably part of the ruse to gain trust and make the abduction smoother.
Oh yeah,
Maybe.
but there's also the like I said, even with that, if you most certainly, if the children saw that at the time, the mask thing, I agree that wearing masks and kidnappings was probably something that they didn't want to do. That if they weren't able to get the abduction completed, that law enforcement would have been focusing on areas that, hey, a masked man, or I just saw a masked man that, you most certainly at 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning, if you see a masked man approaching you, you most certainly fight or flight would come in, and a 13-year-old boy running and going to the closest house, beating on the door, would have stopped that abduction.
All right. And Molly, these abductions seem so organized. I can't believe they weren't working around other areas also, especially for trafficking.
And probably so. More than likely they were. And you're exactly right. That they're organized. Was there more individuals? Why did the guy on the John Gosch flip his interior light on and off several times? Most certainly is strange.
And Cindy added, since this type of predatory behavior is unfortunately profitable.
Most certainly, and that's something else that and even now, when you look at what happened on the islands with the child predator ring that most notably came to the public eye a few years ago, that it still goes on. People, groom children at such a young age to be preyed upon. It's sad.
All right. And Molly, Cyclops can really help with linking up possibly other boys his age abducted in other states and similar ages.
And I found so many of them. And some,
I was going to say, last night we found so many of them.
Yeah. I mean, even last night when we was doing research continuing, and we found that a lot of people were, in certain areas that they were charged with one crime, but they weren't charged with all the crimes. And don't know if they could link all the crimes together. Was that one person involved with all the crimes, or was he just caught for the one crime that he did commit? And that's stuff that we have to look at.
All right, and Molly gave you another one. 6888. Scott, I'm not even going to say that because I'll butcher it. Age 9, walking toward a kid gathering area, St. Cloud, Missouri, small town near St. Louis. No witnesses, has never been found. Younger, but similar to Iowa.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just crazy how a child can just disappear in a flash. But it happens.
All right. At Steve, you and your program will make a difference. A heartfelt thank you.
Thank you. I hope it does. And hopefully working with you and all our people out there in the future as we get this channel going and get organized and take up our next projects and our next programs as we introduce them, that we will have impact working together.
Vanessa Marie, the amount of names I've gone through for my state in just a few days is so disheartening. See, I don't feel, I'm not the only one that feels that way.
I know.
See? All right. My King of Kings, I just watched a doc about this case the other day, and Johnny's mom is such an inspiration. She never stopped fighting for her boy.
No, absolutely not. Like I said, she is the John Wash female version, and most certainly, I mean, that's what mothers do. I mean, if you ever did anything to me, my mama, oh my goodness,
she was hurting on you.
She wasn't but 5'3", but you were talking to her, thought that she weighed 900 pounds. Fierce, absolutely fearless.
All right, Elaine James, society has become so corrupt and evil, children are not safe anymore. And
that's one of the things that hopefully with our program and Cyclops will be able to do, is that it'll bring attention to these communities where these things are happening, not only in the past, but also at present time. And as we build our program and we get this project underway and we get it updated and we figure out the best and practices to maintain updated information, that it will have that impact on a lot of communities and maybe save a few children at the same time.
Now, Steffa says they found the children ?
I don't know which children you're now. Oh, there were 3 children in a car that were found. That's not these 3 children. That was a father that had went fishing with 3 of his children, and they found them in a lake. That happened last week. They've been missing for a week, but they just found them, I think, yesterday or the day before in the lake. And they recovered the father first, and then they found the vehicle and the children later.
I won't ask why he took his kids fishing in the middle of the night. Okay. This is a good question. The Bible group. Steve, what was the weirdest case you were involved in?
Oh, goodness.
Ooh, where do you start?
I'm telling you, I had some.
We'd be here all night.
Oh, man. And it depends on your definition of weird. And some of the weird ones we can't talk about on a public channel. And I've got one that absolutely, if we ever have a private or any type of wall group, I'll tell you about him, because he was a strange individual. Absolutely strange.
So you're not going to give him one?
No. Most of my weird ones are not general public friendly.
Okay. All right. And Molly, Scott, with that long name, looks very much like Mark Allen. Weird.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
they all kind of look alike.
Yeah. I mean, they're just young kids, young, good-looking boys that, that didn't deserve what happened to them at all.
Alora, Mr. and Mrs. Steve, have y'all started your members place yet? No, we have not, but we will let you know when we do, and glad to have you on board.
and that's something else that we're still trying to develop how we want to have an impact and what we will do as we grow and where we can focus. And if I decide I'm going, which I really want to go, there's so many places I really want to go that I want to do a tour around certain geographical area with certain these cases, Iowa, Indiana, all the way out to Texas. There's some of these clusters and things that I really think that they're solvable, and we just need to get the right set of eyes on them and work with a great community, and we'll be able to have impact on some of those older cases. But there's going to be newer cases that we can have an impact on now. And I'm looking at some of them that are more recent and that we need to focus on also that we can have an impact on now while everything is fresh and we have some involvement from the news media, law enforcement, and the community's outrage, whereas they want something done. So we're going to look at some of those also.
All right, Laura's got a good question. Laura Doon, Mr. and Mrs. Steve, has your family ever been a victim of a crime?
Once again,
Sorry.
I can't get when I go to court, and whenever you go to court and they ask you to be a member of a jury, this voir dire. When they ask me, have you ever been a victim of a crime? I've been shot at. I've had people try to kill me with knives. I've been beat on, kicked. So I've been a victim of a crime hundreds of times. I've had people that whenever you try to effect an arrest, some of these men or sometimes it's multiple, will do certain things and try to kill you. I was always lucky and very fortunate in my life that I was able to meet that challenge and win. Sometimes it was close. But yes, I've been a victim of many, many assaults and things like that. But that was just, that was part of my job. So if you're looking at that, but as far as thefts and things, not so much, no. But as far as being victims of a crime of batteries, assaults, destruction of property, most certainly, I've had to buy my new set, numerous get allowances for new clothing numerous times due to that. You destroy them whenever you get in those face-to-face confrontationals. It's not real good on the clothing.
No, and they took it for evidence too.
Yeah, and some of them they took for evidence. Absolutely.
I'd like to know how many are sitting down there. All right, let's see here. Molly, not trying to be a smarty pants. I just followed this case a lot. My first true crime. You're not a smarty pants. We like hearing from you. Don't stop talking.
And absolutely, I mean, and that's the thing is that most of these cases are new to my eyes and things. And you guys have been out there working on these cases and have looked at them and have an interest in certain cases. Absolutely, let me know the ins and outs of what your thoughts are and who these persons of interest are in a private setting, not so much in chat, because we don't want to influence other people on that. And as we grow and we do have some private conversations and as a community, and as we build certain parts of the community for one of our projects, that we'll have a way that we can protect the identities of persons of interest. Because sometimes being a person of interest doesn't mean that you're guilty of the crime, but there's just a lot of indicators. And we most certainly don't want to destroy or impact someone's life negatively just by circumstantial evidence. But there's going to be processes that we'll be able to implicate with our program that we're coming up with that will protect the innocent persons of interest and still allow us to be able to talk about them without destroying their reputation in case they are innocent.
In CCK, we need Riley's files. We do need Riley's files. All right, Olivia, the heartbreak for the families not knowing is unfathomable. That's what drives me crazy. I just don't know. I don't know. The not knowing is just is just bad. Molly, the Cleveland girls, coward hid in plain sight and committed suicide in prison.
Oh yeah, there's so many cases, and how many more victims? But there's so many cases out there. It's absolutely unbelievable.
And my King of Kings, she also met up with the parents of the Iowa girls to give them support. Whew. It follows up, she is a very strong woman. No doubt there. Absolutely. Oop, it jumped. Hold on. Let's see here. Okay, so there we are right there.
Okay.
Dave, Steve, do you think victims' families should have more access to PIs when cases get cold?
Absolutely. Because there may be something that, as a family, that they may not have made that connection, and they most certainly need all the information that they can get.
CCK likes tours. All right, let's see here. Steve, were you in LE when Atlanta child murders and or Atlanta Olympic bombing happened?
Actually, the Atlanta child murders, one of their investigators, after he worked the cases prior, and then he became an instructor. And when I was getting my crime scene certification, he was one of my instructors. And Buffington was his name. And if you ever see documentaries, when you see the blonde hair investigator at some of the scenes, that's Buffington. I think they identify him in some of the documentaries. And then on the Atlanta bombings, we did have some of our officers working the Olympics at that time. And I actually had some classes with Jewel after the bombings, and when he got into law enforcement later on in his career and became and started his law enforcement career after the bombings. I took some classes with him. Nice guy. And sadly, what had happened to him in the public eye was absolutely terrible. So I knew Richard Jewell too. And but like I said, I wasn't during that time period. Yes, that's when I started.
All right. And Molly's got the same idea I did. At Steve, an episode of Weird Funny Cases would be great if it could be put on YT.
Yes. Yes. Most of them can't, although, some of them
we
can.
might find some.
We find some. I got actually, well, no, I can't do that. No.
All right. And Sally, at least give them the option of bringing in VIDOCQ.
Yeah, that's one of the societies that we were discussing. Okay. I've been discussing about society and trying to figure out how we can create some type of think tank also. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the projects that we're going to be working on.
And support with Steffa. Today is the 10-year anniversary of the Evansdale murders. I did not realize that.
Yes, that's when I did my introduction. That's one of the things we discussed. And most certainly, like I said, I think I went online today and saw where they're going to have a motorcycle ride this weekend. And most certainly try to have them in your thoughts and prayers. And if you can do anything for them this week, most certainly do so.
All right, Molly, Atlanta child murders. The forensics on the carpet fibers, etc., was fascinating in a documentary I saw.
There was a lot of evidence processing that was evolutionary and new, groundbreaking, not evolutionary, revolutionary, and that got into the courts from that case. And it was important in identifying Mr. Williams.
And you are done.
I am done. Well, guys, I appreciate y'all getting coming in this evening and listening to me. And just if you have any information, and as we grow and as we continue along this path, I appreciate any and all assistance from you. If you see something, if you have a case or you have a comment that you think that we need to look at, most certainly let me know in comments and or emails, and we will do that. And like I said, I've got about 3 or 4 projects I'm working on right now with Delphi. Hopefully we can get some of those out in the next few days. And then, and once again, I want to thank all my volunteers out there that's helping me with Cyclops. It means a lot. And I've had some great conversations with some of the volunteers on the phone, and we're just working, and hopefully we'll get a map, our initial map, out in the next week or so, because there's still a lot of data. Even when we get it from the volunteers of the information, there's still a lot of background that we have to do on our end to get it into the mapping system so that everyone be able to look at it and make heads and tails of what we've gathered.
And Vanessa Marie, Justice for Elizabeth and Lyric.
Absolutely. And guys, I'll see y'all in a few days. And thank y'all for being with us tonight. And I hope to see y'all this weekend.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.